I'm very excited this week, diary listeners. I feel like Santa came early for all of us. We have the gift of the wonderful Byron Brooks. He's a local comedian and just a really, really sweet guy. We sat, we chatted, and I have to admit that I actually pushed him ahead for reasons that you'll find out later in the diary entry lineup. There's lots of reasons for that, but we are dubbing this first part of his diary entry Human Chess. Enjoy, listeners. Welcome to the Apprenticeship Diaries, where raw meets refined.
Let's be real, we're still working on refining.
What it took, what it takes, and the stories that are made.
Join us as we learn from professionals about how their stories began.
Awesome. Welcome, diary listeners. I'm here today with Byron Brooks, a local comedian here in Maryland, Baltimore County specific, but I'm sure you travel a lot of other places too.
Yes. Hello. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but we kind of met through the BJJ circuit, right?
That is correct. I'm a coach at Ground Control Owings Mills. Been a member of Ground Control for coming up 15 years in June. So yeah,
Right
that's
on.
about you.
Well, and I say that because my sincere love of podcasts really birthed around that time period because,
Oh, nice.
yeah, I started listening to a lot more of Joe Rogan
Mhm.
and then I was coupling that with BJJ. So, or yeah, I'm saying that right, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Their names. But yeah, I was kind of connecting all the dots, and I had loved podcasts a little bit before that, but I got really into it and then decided I wanted my own. So this is kind of cool in a multifaceted kind of way.
Nice.
Um, how long have you been a comedian?
6 years now.
Oh wow, dude, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Is it like I know nothing. I only have assumption. I
Gotcha.
yeah. So I guess how did that transpire? Like how did you get into it?
It's a long story. I have severe ADHD, so so I constantly have to do stuff and have to be involved in things. Um, Long time ago when I moved here to the Maryland area, because I'm originally from North Carolina, I
Oh,
was in several bands. And after getting tired of, bandmates with drug problems and people not showing up and things like that, I decided, well, I spent most of my life like doing martial arts. I wrestled in high school. Um, Saw this UFC thing and I was like, let me just try that. I might actually be pretty good at it. And that's basically how I started doing mixed martial arts.
mhm.
And then after doing mixed martial arts and competing at jiu-jitsu and things like that, um, I got to the age where I just didn't want to compete anymore. I just, it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
But I had to occupy that part of my brain. So I said, same thing as you. About the same time, I was heavy into listening to Joe Rogan, Joey Diaz, people like that. And, I was like, well, these guys are constantly talking about, just going to an open mic and do it. Just go to an open mic. You don't have to have the greatest material, but, it's your first time. So after a while of listening to them, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to an open mic. And
Yeah.
then stayed there basically.
That's really, I mean, I feel like with BJJ and martial arts as a background, you certainly get the moxie to be like, well, if anybody cops an attitude with me after the event,
Yeah,
I know how to take
absolutely.
care of myself a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I have to attribute mixed martial arts and BJJ to being confident on the
Mhm.
microphone.
Yeah.
um because it's nerve-wracking sitting there waiting for your name to be called and then going up in front of a bunch of strangers and talking to them. um Being a mixed martial arts coach, I do that every time I instruct a class.
Hmm.
So gave me a lot of confidence. Even if my jokes weren't good, I said them with confidence, you know.
Well,
So,
and a kindness too, because
yeah,
I didn't do it long before I realized my body was at that limit.
yeah.
It was like, no, no, it's fine. I was like, no, it's really not fine. Um,
Yeah, at some point you got to slow down, like, or you'll
I
just
mean,
break. Yeah.
when I entered, they were like, so, what, I was like, I've done nothing. I know nothing. I just heard this was cool and I didn't get hit. So
Yeah, there you go.
I've
There you
come to
go.
find out my body's not even really great about that. So, but what I found was this natural people think of it when martial arts and stuff, like they think of it as a very aggressive thing. And I think that, as you pointed out, it does build confidence in a way that's very measured, because
Mhm.
you really understand who you are and what you are in that realm. And it's so nice because, as you mentioned too, the ADHD, the physical exertion that it makes you do, and the chess maneuvers and games is so I mean, it's not it's like the best kind of exhaustion within.
Yeah, it is. It's a combination of mental and physical exhaustion to a point where when you're not doing BJJ, you're very calm. Like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you know next time you go in, it's going to be a mental and physical war.
Well, and I found kind too,
Yeah,
because I feel like it gave you a very real perspective of people on a physical level, and kind of let you know, like, oh, if I were to engage with this person, these are the things that I would have to, on a physical level, this is what I'd have to
absolutely.
worry about. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I tell people all the time, like there's a huge perception now that, like, when you're being in a verbal kind of back and forth, that you could be attacked. And I was
Absolutely.
like, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Being attacked is when we're not talking anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
right now there's still a lot of hope for this conversation we're having. When it goes beyond words, then you're being attacked.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
you
And
know.
one thing I think people don't realize about, even in comedy, it's the same thing I see in comedy. When you go to a mixed martial arts gym or a jiu-jitsu gym, you're going to have all ages, all walks of life, all religious affiliations and political affiliations, and you're all there training. You're not talking about all that stuff. You're just a
Yeah.
team,
Mm-hmm.
and you love each other, and you're there for each other. You don't care, if I'm a Republican or he's a Democrat, or that's a man or a woman, or it's just a team that loves each other.
Yeah.
And it's honestly the same way in comedy. There's comedians that just come from all walks of life, but we see each other as comedians. We don't see each other as this type of person, or I believe in this. We're all on the same team.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it's funny because this kind of brings us back to how this kind of transpired, us coming
Yeah.
together for the podcast, because I was like, it's official now. I love Matt Rife. And you're
Everybody
like,
loves him.
dude, I'm fucking funny. I've been your friend for forever. Like, the hell. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's kind of fucked up. Come on my show. And I've wanted to talk, because I love comedy and my heart
Mhm.
has been broken for a very long time, since COVID and since
Oh,
all of this.
absolutely. Yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, I mean, because you've experienced now 4 years out of the 6 that you've been practicing comedy in that landscape.
Yeah. Definitely there was a change. I'll just talk about the local scene. There was a definite change in the local scene since before COVID and after COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think COVID was a good thing for comedy. During the lockdown, I thought it was the most horrible thing ever. But coming out of it, what it did was all the comedians who were active before COVID, if they really didn't love what they were doing, or they weren't passionate about comedy, they quit.
Oh, that's
So what
good.
happened is the ones who really, really work hard and the ones who are passionate about their comedy rose to the top. And also there was a huge crop of we call them COVID comedians,
Mm-hmm.
because I would say 30% of the comedians locally right now came directly after COVID. They decided after COVID, I'm going to try comedy. And a lot of them are really solid comedians and good people. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say when people ask me about, the whole COVID and comedy, I think it was a good thing. I think it made the comedians who were really serious about what they're doing kind of rise to the top, you know?
I'd have to say the same
Mhm.
in general about COVID because I
Yeah.
think that not enough people were really keeping death in mind as they were
Hmm.
making choices, and I
Yep.
think that that helped a lot of people kind of really make some solid choices for themselves afterwards.
Absolutely. Yep.
But even in tattooing, it's the same thing. I've interviewed a few people now that were COVID tattoo babies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and they're freaking out right now because they're like, "What the hell's happening?" Like, there's this slow season, and I was like, "Oh, y'all were reaping in the benefits of that
Yep.
after COVID
Reaping all the benefits. Yeah.
explosion of people like coming out of the woodworks, being like, we need to feel again." and and yeah, I agree with you. So before that, like, where was your first open mic night?
My first open mic was at a place called I it was a place called, what was it? The Sidebar open mic in Baltimore.
Okay.
This place called the Sidebar, which was a punk rock club.
Okay.
Um, they had basically for the longest time before COVID, the most popular open mic. But being my first time there, I didn't know I was going to get hazed. Um, so I so I show up to this open mic. Of they I believe it started 8. You're supposed to get there to sign up around 7:30. So I got there super early. I was the second person on the list. Um, sat there, got myself a drink, and sat there and waited and waited. And 11 o'clock rolls by. I've had 5 or 6 drinks, and they finally call my name. So of course, I go up there and bomb miserably. And I honestly didn't do another open mic for another 2 months after that. Because I was kind of like, if I'm going to go to an open mic and every time I go, I'm going to be the last person up, and I got to work in the morning, this might not be for me.
Right.
And then about 2 months later, I was still writing comedy. Um, this girl named Christy Bellich ran an open mic at what they called the Lou Costello Room in Hamden, Baltimore. Um, she right under her post, she wrote, "This is a no pressure open mic." And I said, well, let me try this again. And she was super fair. She put me up in the order that we got in. She was super, super supportive. Always gave me like advice after I got off stage. Always told me to come back. Glad to have you here. And really, honestly, she's who really kept me motivated um, to doing comedy. So yeah, shout out to Christy Bellich out there.
Oh, that's great. And her club and the open mic night forum.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And so there's a lot of similarities
Mhm.
between what you're doing. And I found this no matter what professional I've had on this podcast, this very when you pursue passion in a non-linear way, it's very similar. And
Yep.
you find your old heads that believe in a certain amount of hazing
Yeah.
for their noobs, like, oh, they gotta earn it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
um what was your approach on your first one, but besides the drinking, a couple drinks and all that stuff, but like, how did you formulate your first set? Like, how did you go about planning for that, or did you not?
So, I did. I wrote what I thought was a good set.
Mhm.
being your first time up, that's a hit or miss every time because you really don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, which probably was the wrong thing to do, was I would write stories about things that happened in my life, but I wasn't really a good storyteller at the time. And I tried to write a new 5 minutes every week. So at that time, I was going to an open mic twice a week. I wanted new material every week. That was a mistake. What I should have been doing was sticking to 5 minutes and then using all that time to perfect that 5 minutes and figure out how to get laughs instead of, oh, that kind of is okay, let me go to something new.
Right.
So I did that for about 6 months until I realized, hey, I need to the jokes that are getting laughs, I need to perfect those jokes. I need to say those in front of new people. I need to switch up how I say it. So the first year of comedy for me was a big learning experience. And I did it a lot different than other comedians. And I took this from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, to be honest with you. When I first started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, people would always ask me, when are you going to do your first competition? And you're like 2 or 3 months in and you're like, I don't know anything.
Like, get out of my face,
like,
bro. Like, this is overwhelming.
Yeah.
My first day, I had a crotch in my face, and they asked me what I would do in the situation that I was like face to face with another man. And I was like, well, usually we'd make out, but I don't think that's what this is about right now. And they just like were aghast. And I was like, what assholes? Like, seriously, like, I don't know what this is confronting.
Yes. So I took that experience when I started doing comedy, and I didn't accept the show until a whole and complete year because I didn't want to go up with half-ass material and then somebody, a booker say, oh, well, we're not going to invite him back, So it took, it was a year, a whole entire year before I said, somebody asked me, do you want to do a show? And I was like, yes, I'll do a show. A lot, I would say almost 98% of the comedians, as soon as they do an open mic, they want to do a show. And they get and I think that's where the recidivism rate comes in, where they quit, is because they want those shows and they want those big shows way too fast. And it's like, develop your comedy first. Right. Because you can get a big show, and like I said earlier, go up there and bomb. They're never going to invite you back. Never. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, it's the same. It's the same with anything. You got those hungry hearts. That's why I started this podcast, was really to let people know the kind of turnaround that they could hope to have. Yeah. And it was the same thing with me and BJJ. Like, people were like, "Oh, you really should do a competition." And I said, I understand what you're saying. I understand the things that I would get out of a competition, but I'm really I'm looking to develop very specific things right now.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
And I think too, if we kind of correlate it to tattooing for a second, like, there's a big push right now for people to really segregate within a style of. And you see that in BJJ too, like, people have their signature moves and things like that. Well, when you do that too quickly, first of all, you're putting yourself in a competitive field that you have no business putting yourself in, but also right. Yeah. But also, like, there's this huge, like, heartbreak of like, why aren't people like wanting to do my style? It's my style. And it's like, because, dude, if you don't have enough people actually asking for your style specifically, then you're not ready to signify within a style. And it's like, I think you have to have enough people really ask you, like, do a show. And then once you have a lot of people asking you to do a show, then you're ready to do a show.
Then exactly. Yep. Yeah. Exactly. That's pretty much how I did it. It was every once in a while somebody asked me, hey, you want to do this show? And I'd be like, I don't feel like I'm ready for this. And then around the year mark, it was 4 or 5 people, hey, you want to do this show? Maybe not. By the third person, like within that week, I was like, well, they obviously think I'm ready.
Right.
So
Right. Well, and they
let's
need
give
to
this thing
be
a try. Yeah.
different people and different perspectives, because the
Yeah.
first person who says that to you, you're like, what is your motivations for me doing a
Exactly.
show?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you just want to watch me flail around,
Mhm.
for your own amusement? Like, I know this would be fun for you, but I'm gonna die. No, that's cool. And what do you, I mean, now that you've been doing this, I mean, I might be jumping. I'm
No,
gonna
you're
pause that.
fine.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
pause that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. I wanted to touch back to COVID for a second. Do you feel like, because this was the thing in tattooing as well and fostering this new generation, do you think that it really forced you guys to adopt tools to communicate your comedy, like the internet, and really like kind of ground you in those kind of online tools?
Yes and no. We definitely, because of COVID, the whole virtual comedy, on Zoom comedy became
Mhm.
popular. I did not like it at all. It's a different type. It's a different type of comedy when your audience are squares on a computer. The
Mhm.
timing's different. You have to tell your jokes different. And you just don't get you're getting laughs, but you don't get the same adrenaline rush as actually being in front of live people.
Mhm.
So it was good for while it lasted, but I'm kind of glad it's gone. Every once in a while, you'll still see, an online comedy show or stuff like that, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that, like the technology that we're using, I see a lot of I actually do flyers for a lot of the local comedians for their shows.
Oh, right on.
So yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
we're actually using a lot of AI to make flyers, AI to make like my friend who runs the port, he has he has upwards of 30 comedians that he has a week that he's got to schedule and put on specific days, and he just lets AI do it now.
Yeah.
He
No,
puts
that's
their
a good
name
way to
into
do it.
it. Yep, and just let the AI handle the work. So that's definitely one technology that's become prevalent in comedy now.
Diary listeners, if you are an artist, my hope is this holiday season you have had awesome opportunities to express yourself creatively, made gifts for family. There's nothing better than doing something like that for a loved one. But if you've been in the dumps and it's kind of been slow when it comes to, especially if you're a tattoo artist, you know, things like that. AI's moving in on your freaking job as a designer or an illustrator. Never fear. Go back to the drawing board. It might just be time for you to meet with a group of artists and get some continuing education. You can do that with Reinventing the Tattoo. Go and click in our show notes the TAD10 link. It'll give you 10% off your Reinventing the Tattoo subscription. It's a full year. 10% off is great. And I have to mention that before the 10% off, it's a steal. It really, really is. With or without it, we do get a kickback. I'm not even going to lie. You'll be paying us as well as Reinventing the Tattoo. But even if you don't find it that way, my hope is that you will get a subscription. It is the best way to up your game as an artist of any kind, really. It's perfect. If you're a studio owner, buy it for your crew. Guy encourages people to share the login information so that the entire studio can grow together. This is a fun way for everybody to learn and, grow. So go and do that. Don't be in the dumps this holiday season, because we got a new year ahead and it's going to be spectacular. I know it's a bit late in the game, diary listeners. If you are stuck in a situation where you don't have the right gift, it might be time to bring out the macaroni and make somebody a necklace. I don't know if I would want to brave any of the stores at this point, but if you happen to be in a situation where you're not meeting with everybody right on the day, those friends, maybe some family that you're not going to see for a little bit, don't forget you can still order something from my friends Tara Bell at Tara Kendall Creations. She's got an Etsy shop, fantastic products that she's done. There's also Ken Madden of Mad K Studios. He's an amazing car guy. He does great car portraits. Probably too late to commission anything, but maybe if you know somebody whose birthday is coming up or something like that. He also has spectacular products that he's already put out on horribledesigns.com. You can catch his product line there. Just look up Ken Madden. That's Madden. Then there's also Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. They make fantastic hot sauces. In fact, I'm fairly certain Rico has decimated the last of it. So we're going to have to order more soon too, just for us. But don't think that your window has closed. If you're going to see people after the holiday, you know you're going to be giving gifts later. Please, please, please. Check out these people. Check out the products that they're making, that they're selling. You're not only going to give a very fantastic gift that I assure you is of high quality and amazing, but you'll also be helping out a passionate being in this world who's doing all they can to turn up the light inside and live the life that they want to live. So it's people helping people, and I can't think of anything better to celebrate and endorse this holiday season. Thank you, listeners. Okay, so it feels like a good time to tell you guys why I actually bumped a few awesome interviews with other wonderful, wonderful people for Byron. He actually is going to be performing on New Year's Eve. So I wanted to give him a platform beforehand and make sure that this episode, this diary entry of his, two-parter, so come back next week, airs for the 2 weeks leading up to his time in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's going to be performing at Goodnights Comedy Club, room 861. And if you don't have anything going on, you might want to take a trip down to North Carolina. I hear that they have fabulous people down there. And bring in the new year right with some laughter. Thanks so much, diary listeners. Back to our podcast. Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of artists are freaking out about that because they're losing design jobs as a result of it, and it's like, dude.
Yeah. Okay. You can't beat them, join them, right?
Well, and the thing of it is that like what I was gonna say is that you're really going to lose if you're not willing to confront people, because at the end of the day, that's what people crave, is that connection to each other. That's what they're really willing to risk high for.
Very
and
true.
Yeah, and when I was talking to somebody who actually does develop AI tools in our industry, and he was like, when you're doing Zoom, so much of our ability to communicate with each other is shut down. Like there's like a lot of sensory perception that we miss, smell, there's certain body languages you're not able to see and you're not able to read. And I would imagine that it's like that. I did public speaking for a while, and it's like that when you're in front of people. You can read a crowd and you can feel them at a certain level. And I would imagine that this tool really limits that ability.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, even like, because I'll give you an example. I'm doing a online comedy show, and I'm looking at the blocks of people, and you always seem to like lock in on the block that you probably shouldn't be locked in. And there's a guy in his boxers walking around feeding his cat. Like, you're not even listening to the show.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That honestly is like a comedy special in itself.
Yeah.
Like if only you could get people to like have some awareness about themselves as an
Exactly.
audience. Oh my God, that is hilarious. Because if the tables could only turn, um,
Exactly.
where there's some accountability if you're in a crowd, out in a place, you have to dress, you have
Yep.
to clothes on or else you're not getting
Act
in.
accordingly.
And you have to stand there in front of a person and actually heckle,
Yeah.
face to face and be that kind of ballsy person. That's hilarious in itself. That's too funny. um I didn't even think about it. Like, because
Yeah.
all the Zoom calls that I've done have been like talking to clients, remotely for their
Business calls.
tattoo.
Yeah.
It's always been like, we're professional here, like we're not supposed to be doing. So that's interesting, man. Wow. Not, and that was what I was going to ask you too, is that like when you get on stage, I would imagine it's really kind of almost hard to see the crowd beyond the first row. Like you really can't.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Um, there's like I said, using the port again because I'm there. I'm actually there tonight.
Right on.
It's a
Yay.
small, like 100-seater club,
Uh-huh.
but even it being small, I can't see past the second row just with
Yeah.
the lights and everything like that. So it's a lot of, listening for voices if you're doing crowd work and kind of, what's your name? What do you try to figure out what they look like, things like that. But honestly, the number one sense that I use when I'm on stage, I don't really have to look at the crowd, but I definitely am listening very intently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to everything that's going on in the crowd, even if like you're on your phone. I know you're on your phone. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and that can serve as a nugget that just kind of gives that audience a very rare, because that's the beautiful thing about crowd work, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
they're getting something that no other crowd will get. That's, kind of a spin-off of that moment. I heard something. I started going to church a year ago, and I have a favorite person at church. I mean, it should be my pastor. It is my
Yeah.
pastor, but I have a
Mhm.
favorite parishioner, and his name is Neil, and he texts me little ditties. He's a much older gentleman, so he has no, like, he's always asking me questions about modern technology, and he's like, what are people doing? Like, he's like, I'm so glad that the majority of my life was sane. And so he
Nice.
texted me this wonderful thing. It just randomly, he'll send me stuff. He's like, listening is the first step to loving someone. And
Mm,
I think that that's if people always look at comedy sometimes as bullying, and I think it can be um if you're not genuinely listening. But
absolutely.
comedy is supposed to remind people that we're absurd half the time, that this life is
Yeah.
absurd, and if you want it to be less absurd, then maybe you need to focus in on that one spot and turn it around a little bit. But it's a loving awareness that you get when something is able to be made fun of, especially if it can
Absolutely.
be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. I just thought I would point that out because I think that, I don't think people realize the beauty in being uh chewed out, man. Like how I
Yeah.
like if you do anything in life, you're going to get haters.
Absolutely. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
And
Yep.
I sometimes I'm like, man, why am I up on this, in this platform? I want to give you more of a mic, like, because that was a good burn. That was a good burn.
Yeah. Nice.
Some of the reviews of this podcast, I'm like, dude, this is freaking hilarious. I'll post them up on my
Uh-huh.
Instagram and be like, I did one, I framed it like it was a needlepoint. Like I
Mhm.
took a needlepoint font and like put it out there, and I was like, look at this sick like 1-star review that I got. This is the
But
best.
some people, and I know people like this, literally just get on the internet to just
Oh
troll
yeah.
people. Like
Oh yeah.
they don't feel the way they do. They just want to push your buttons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that they're there.
Yeah.
I pray for them.
I do too.
Honestly, because and there's a, not to segue too much, but there's kind of a thought in biblical or spiritual terms, is that you fear the person who's irreverent and who's a contrarian, because they'll waste so much of your time and they don't care. And there's nothing that you can do to actually prove anything to them. They're not somebody of a high proof or need of, because I could respect somebody who's like a doubting Thomas. He was the guy who was like an apostle of Christ, that was like, I'm gonna need to put my fingers in the holes that he was freaking strung up by in order for me to believe that this dude has risen from the dead. I'm gonna need it. I'm gonna need to touch it and feel it. That's somebody who needs high proof of things.
Yes.
That person I can at least respect, because they need to be proven too. But if you're talking to somebody who just no matter what is playing the devil's advocate, you're wasting your time.
You're wasting your time. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I've made it a mission of mine to kind of like just put these people on display. Like whenever they dog me, I give them a platform and I just put them up. My boyfriend's like, no, you should block them. You shouldn't give them any time. I said, I block like people trying to goad me into like buying their advertisement and stuff. I don't like those people.
Annoying.
That is really annoying. But the people who take their time to be thorns on my side, I just give them a platform. I just put them up and I'm just like, look at this person. Like, check this out. Like,
how crazy they are. Yeah.
Like, wow. If they only took so much time to just actually do something.
Yep. Absolutely.
Where's your podcast? Where can I watch you? Oh, you don't have one? Oh,
yeah, okay. Exactly.
But yeah, I kind of
sometimes I have to in my line of work, I have to deal with those people in real time, like actually in my face.
Yeah. Well, and that brings us to another thing. I don't know if comedy, it's probably a second thing that you do, but like, what's your day job? I'm sure you have one.
I'm graphic designer.
Okay.
I'm just part-time graphic designer. I work at Ground Control, and then I do comedy.
So you have 3 jobs. That's great. That's awesome. Wonderful. Do you have hopes that any one of them, or are you just living the dream right now? Do you hope that any one of them will just take off?
I hope my comedy career does take off. Any artist always gets discouraged, and I stay discouraged all the time, but I always have to take a step back and say, every year you've been doing comedy, you've had a better opportunity. So next year is going to be better. And the year after that is going to be better. So, that comparison is a thief of joy. So one thing that also I have to do is stop looking at my peers who are doing, bigger shows than me and stuff like that. And I always, when I see somebody, doing something good, I praise them. I give them their flowers, but sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, why am I not there yet?
I hear you. What would you say? Because you said that you were given notes in the beginning. What are some things that you feel like are still things that you struggle with going up there?
Right now, I as in my material wise, or
like for example, me, I know this. I know that everything's better if you zoom out and you heighten contrast and you skip the details.
Gotcha.
But I love those juicy little details so much and won't let go.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm learning constantly something new all the time. Right now, what I'm working on is definitely getting my crowd work better. And I'll let you in on a little secret. 90% of comedians don't like doing crowd work. How
come?
They want to do their material. They want to do what they wrote, and they want you to laugh at that. Crowd work, really, honestly, is the crowd doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
You ask them a question, you're laughing at them. You're not laughing at the comedian.
Yeah.
If you really think about it.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to get better at it because that's where your following is going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing a lot of crowd work done on crowd work clips on Instagram and YouTube. Um, that's because they want to put material out there that isn't their main material. So when you actually come to a show, you get to hear their jokes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to do crowd work, but if you come to one of my shows, I'm probably not going to do a lot of crowd work.
Right.
But if I do get to a good crowd work clip, that's the main thing I'm going to put on the internet because that's
Right.
what's going to get you your followers in your crowd.
So going back, what do you think your struggle is with your crowd work?
I'm just I'm not as quick-witted as some of my peers. Like there's a guy here, Umar Khan, very good. He actually does a crowd work show every first Thursday at a comedy club near here. And he's just so quick. Matt Rife, super quick on his feet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that quickness, so my crowd works a little different. I can still get the laugh, but it's not like I'm going to come up with something quick and witty. I'm probably going to ask you the dumbest question possible and let you get the laugh for me. Yeah.
I think that's a certain style that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That might, if you lean into that, that's that's a compassionate laugh where you're allowing somebody else to have a stage that if you brand it well, that could be really cool. Where, for instance, I was watching Miracle on 34th Street, and there was there's this part where Santa Claus, he starts telling people, well, you can't get this here at Macy's, but you can go over here to Gimbel's and you can get it. And Macy's ends up realizing, like, oh, their sales strategy was off. People were loving the fact that they were willing to compassionately send people other places.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think that might be something to embrace in itself, as a stylistic thing. Like, hey, dude, if you want to take over the show, go for it. Like, less work for me. Like, here you go, my friend. Like, that's see, if I were to attempt comedy, I don't know. This might be just me in my own head, but I think that I would do awesome crowd work. Mostly just because I'm like that. I'm like, oh, you want the stage? Like, here, go ahead. And less work for me, bro. Let's go for it. And also I meet so many people within it makes sense that the kind of artist that you are is a graphic designer, because there's a lot of control, there's a lot of back and forth with one entity where you're designing something very specific. But for me, I meet every kind of different person within my art, and I'm able to meet with people for hours within their chosen professions and really have these in-depth conversations with them about what they do, how they do it, and I'm designing a tattoo specifically for them. And so the insights into different kinds of people is very diverse. Now, within graphic designing, for sure, you're meeting on the back end with people like that in a way, but people open up in a very real way when you're inflicting pain on them in ways that they don't normally. And so I feel like I'd have those quick digs that just come from references from clients that, like, they've shared shit with me that, like, they didn't know was material.
That's awesome, actually.
And I have that all the time. And it's also, when I did Toastmasters, for example, there's things called table topics that they would give you that were like a 1 or 2 minute, just quick, like you get to comment on one thing. And that was where I shined. I was able to come up with something automatically and spin off of that immediate. Whereas I had a controlled speech, I found myself rushing. I found myself like not really being, I got really hung up on the material that I wanted to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that somebody walking around in their boxers, like that was so hilarious to me
Yeah,
when you
so
said that.
distracting.
Because oh my God, if I had that, I would be so, so distracted. It's too
Yeah.
funny, man. That's such a great I might just, I might have to put a clip of like when I post this, like of just somebody walking around in their boxers because it's too funny. Um, um,
Nice.
but yeah, like I think I would struggle with the actual long form material. How do you I guess now I can get to the question that I had. What do you think your style is of comedy now that you've been developing it for about 6 years?
It's changing as we speak.
Okay. Very cool. Very, very cool.
When I first started, my first year I was doing stories.
Mhm.
Then I started to realize that, I can't do these stories without set up punchlines.
Mhm.
Like I was going off stories and kind of the story itself being funny to get the laugh instead of there actually being jokes.
Mhm.
So I really made a dramatic switch to almost doing one-liners, where it's a distinct setup, distinct punchline. And then after I got really good at that, I started tagging it up before and after. So if I have a setup and I have a punchline, I'm probably going to have two tags before the punchline comes and maybe a tag after. Um, right now, what I'm working on is delivery. Um, I still have the style of joke telling where it's you know what the setup is and you know that punchline is coming, type style, but I'm working on making it flow off my tongue like I'm having a conversation with you instead of me telling you a joke.
Right.
So I'm learning now how to disguise that joke in just conversation type form.
Mhm.
But next couple months I'll probably be working on something else. I get so much inspiration from my peers.
Yeah.
When I see one of my friends, killing on stage and he gets a great laugh. I'm like, how does he getting that laugh? What's his joke structure? How is he delivering his jokes? I'm not stealing material, but
No, no, no,
I'm
no.
definitely looking at other people's styles to see, what could I take from that? What could I learn from that to make my comedy funnier? You know.
Is there aside from just, you submit yourself to learn,
Mhm.
have is there any place where comedians meet and they discuss how they do that, or is there any kind of educational forums that are available? I
There
don't know.
are,
Okay.
but 99% of comedians really honestly just it's a crash course of self-learning.
Yeah.
Like no
Yeah.
one really ever told me how to write a joke
Hmm.
or I've gotten ideas from people like, hey, if you do a joke about this, that might be funny. And then I write the joke. But we used to have a writers group that stopped meeting. That was like once every other week.
Hmm.
And it was just like I said, it wasn't like we were telling people how to tell the jokes. We were just giving them little seeds of, hey, this subject might be funny. Why don't
Right.
you work on that? Or we might actually tell one of our jokes, is there something I can add? Do you have a tag for this joke?
Hmm.
Um, but that happens not very often.
Right.
One of my favorite times um, doing comedy on a regular basis. I'm generally at the Port on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday every week. It's one of our new comedy clubs, and the I would say the almost most of the best comics in the DMV go to work out their new material there. So they have showcases on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays where you'll see the top comics like come and just work out new stuff. They don't really do new material. But one of my favorite things that I look for it all the time is when my friend Justo, he'll come in, he'll do his set, and he'll come back to the green room and he'll literally say, trying to do a joke about this, go. And then everybody in the green room will just start spitballing ideas. And a lot of our jokes just come from just like being in the green room, like, this joke ain't hitting the way I want it to. What could I do with it?
Right.
Or how can I add on to this joke? It's
That's
a lot
awesome.
of that. Yeah. And it's spontaneous. It's not like we planned.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that this happens Mondays and Tuesdays because quite frankly, I'm not, I mean, you mentioned going to the sidebar. I've been there. I've been dragged there by friends who wanted to watch a punk show. And I was like, I wasn't into any of it. I have cousins that are in bands, and
yeah.
I know it sounds awful, like don't trust somebody who's not really into music. But it's not that I'm not into music. I'm not into the crowds.
I'm with you.
So, but a comedy special, people have talked to me about, what my thing is. I like going to lectures. I like going to public speaking venues. I think I would love to go and see you perform. And I'm happy that it happens on the 2 days off that I have. So nice. That's wonderful to know. And I would love to meet more and more comedians. They're I mean, I really I really think I get
they're a strange group of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're dark as shit. Like they're cynical. You have to be, because
you have to. Yeah.
You have to be. I had a tattoo artist on here that said that he was an optimistic nihilist, and I was like, well, thank God you're optimistic about it.
A lot of very strong individual personalities.
Yes.
Sometimes those personalities clash. I'm not gonna say there isn't any beef between comedians, but most of the time it's really friendly. We really look out for each other.
Yeah.
I
love that.
We're all a bunch of egotistical, self-absorbed people, but you
have to be borderline crazy, because
I say delusional.
No.
Yeah.
Well, no matter how deluded we all are, we are super grateful. Byron, thank you for joining us. This is part 1 of your diary entry with us. We have part 2 coming out next week, but when we experience part 2, it will be after we experience Christmas. So for all of you that celebrate, I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. I just hope it's a wonderful time with family, and that everybody does exactly what they want to do for that holiday, and everything scales. Everything gets better as we bring in this new year. I love you all. Thank you all. God bless as always. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. You can find the Apprenticeship Diaries on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our IG is the_apprenticeship_diary. If you would like to offer constructive criticism or an interview, drop us an email at theapprenticeshipdiaries@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from our listeners.